Hi, this is JP Newman on Investing on Purpose, and today I'm super excited. You guys have heard for a while about the nonprofit. First you got to make your money, have your profit. Then, if you're lucky, or maybe you start early, you get to go into your nonprofit passions. And today we are with Jennifer Searles, the CEO of Veritas. My favorite thing to talk about these days is a dream of a nonprofit that I had, and then actually being able to manifest it. And Jennifer has taken a dream of mine and taken it, rocketed it exponentially to a whole other level. And today, Jennifer, I thought it'd be a great episode to listen to. I know you're used to hearing about for-profit stories, but I think you're going to find the story really interesting. Is that as you're building your business and going deeper into your why, on the for-profit side, how does a nonprofit manifest? And in my case, for Veritas and the dream of this, it's all goes within real estate. And it actually all started, if I can, that all started because when I got into real estate and multifamily apartments, workforce housing, you really see how a lot of America lives. And at first, when I was more younger and in survival mode, didn't feel like I had the luxury to think about, gosh, these people aren't living that great. And I didn't feel like a lot of landlords, as I was like going through buildings, I just didn't think that a lot of people were living that well. And it took a minute to kind of figure out, like, we probably could do better in my career. At first, I think you don't try to not think about it. You're just thinking about the deal. But as you get bigger, hopefully whatever your business is, you're starting to think about, well, who are my stakeholders? Who are all my stakeholders who are affected by my business? And in this case, very much it started to occur to me that one of my major stakeholders is the residents. But and you and I have talked about this, Jennifer, before. A lot of times it seems so obvious, but people aren't thinking about their residents. They're thinking about their investors. Like, how am I going to grow my company? Well, if my investors are happy, they'll give me more money. If I get more money, I can grow my company, which is true. But then who pays for that? A lot of times it's the residents, because you're trying to cut budgets. You're trying to do everything you can. So if you go completely into this kind of extractive mentality, then the residents lose. But what if you were to change it up? And this was kind of the dream. What if you change it up where you don't have to be extractive and you can be accretive, that happy residents may stay longer and therefore have a better experience. And now you're contributing, giving more while making bigger profits, which is my best day.
What I love about this story is you've often said, if you put a room of asset managers together and you said, what's the thing that makes you the most successful? We talk about the art of the deal or my relationship or my hard work, but very few people would say the resident making that monthly payment is my success point. And what you've done is really isolate who is that stakeholder. And then the most important thing is it's not a lose-lose game. And
Right.
that's so often what we think about when we start talking about nonprofits and helping people. It's about, if I give to you, then I have to lose for
Right.
somebody else to win. And what we're suggesting here is a complete ecosystem. And really, the acknowledgement deep in our soul, what we already know, that when I win, you win. And when you win, I win. And we're all in it together, whether we like it or not.
Yes.
And we're just bringing that out and helping people really live their best life, their best lane in an ecosystem.
And the cool thing, if I can say that, it's very easy. Some people might say, oh my God, this isn't my episode right now. It feels very woo-woo. They're going to talk about caring for people and they're going to talk about all these things. How do I make money? What's my what's my 7 steps to $1 million? And I would argue to hang on for a minute, because what we're finding, there is such a strong business case, profitability of growing my business on the for-profit side by simply doing the right thing. And we're going to actually talk a lot about that in this episode. That I think a lot of people, Jennifer, assume that nonprofits are these kind of soft, not as competitive, they don't really treat them like businesses. And I think what's really cool as we go through this episode, you're going to start to see that actually Veritas is a business. It's in the business of serving people, but your vision, your competitiveness, boy, you do not let up. You are an entrepreneur. You are a businesswoman. It just so happens that from a tax perspective, it's a nonprofit business, but every bit of Veritas that we talk about is treated just like a business. And so I'm hoping on this episode today that, again, for all of you growing businesses who say, I don't have the time, the luxury to even think about a nonprofit, I would say slow down a minute here, because I would argue that if you think about something that really matters to you, why you started, what was the purpose of your business? What was the product or service that you were going to create? And then can you broaden that out and look at all the stakeholders in your product or service? And is there one little piece you can effectuate? And it doesn't need to be a grand idea. It could start with one small thing. Antonio and I dreamed of a garden with tomatoes. We actually just thought, why don't we plant a garden? There's extra wasted space there. Let's go plant a garden and see what happens. Like, it truly becomes one step at a time. So I would say, can't wait to share like this journey and this conversation with you. And just know that literally one small action leads to a second action, which leads to an amazing CEO, which leads to a major organization, with now you and I having this audacious goal, Jennifer, audacious, of changing multifamily apartments in the United States by having programs come with rent as an industry standard across the United States, that everybody who's looking for an apartment in the workforce can expect free programs and programs that will come with the rent.
The new amenity standard for working families
Yes.
will be health, education, and economic programs at the place where they live.
Yes.
And that's what, more importantly, a way to think about our nonprofit is exactly business-like. You know, we are feeling a deep market need. For-profit owners, investors like yourself, you don't have the capacity to be able to deliver this kind of impact service. And that's what Veritas is. It's not some charity that you're just giving to feel good. It's a partner in creating this community, this sustainable, replicable, scalable space for your residents. And so that's what makes us different, is that partnership instead of just someplace that makes you feel good to support.
Right. Let's take one step back, because I jumped right into this thing. Usually I give you background. So just to kind of jump into this thing, it's funny how life goes, because it was a dream that one day, if I was wealthy enough, or one day if my company was successful enough, then I could play with this idea of a nonprofit. And I was already kind of thinking about, gosh, there's so many obvious loopholes that would be great for my apartment communities. And one was telemedicine. And this was before the pandemic. And I was experimenting with it. I thought, gosh, employees give benefits. Why couldn't apartment communities do that? And then COVID hits. And then all of a sudden, this little nonprofit that was kind of starting, all of a sudden had a crisis and a need, which was the coronavirus. And I just remember literally jumping on a card table. I didn't have a home office. And I just started calling people to raise money. And Teladoc was further enough. We had gone far enough that they were willing to like put up with us and actually let us try this kind of thing. And then right at that time, as I'm sitting there, at home, isolated, never thinking that this was going to blow up to the next thing. I mean, I literally had to call all my friends and ask for money, but I figured these people in commercial real estate have made a ton of money. The brokers, the general contractors, the roofers, everyone in this value chain for the last 11 years have been on this wave of success and prosperity. Now it's time for me to ask them, not as an investor to invest with me, but to invest with me in something important, not just for me, but for them. Because if you're a contractor, guess how you made your money? A renter paid rent. Hey, broker in your big fancy Mercedes, great. How did you make that Mercedes? Because somebody paid rent. One person at a time. And that realization was great, but I had to explain this to them. And you think it would be obvious, but it's very different being on a phone call. If I was to say to Alex one day, as your company grows, do you want to put money with me? You're going to get an 8% return. Now, if the conversation is not about a for-profit, but are you ready to reinvest in the very community that helped make your success? The very family, the very people that actually made your family go to good schools, vacations. Are you ready to invest in it? Interesting. The answer from some people, it was, I can see these people as a stakeholder, or I don't see them. Some people were very nicely brushed me off, and then some people wrote their first checks. But it was those first checks that gave us enough money to get telemedicine started, and this idea of, we actually need to hire a real leader here. We need to hire a real leader to take this to the next step. This is getting real, because people are saying this is important, that we're actually helping them during a crisis, keeping them out of the emergency rooms, because as soon as they were on a rent roll, they would qualify for telemedicine in communities. And we were making this up. And right then we did a job search. And this amazing human being, Jennifer, we actually interviewed quite a few people. And it was very obvious that Jennifer, you have such unique energy. And again, Other people, I think, saw it as a job. And it was your passion came through from the first conversation that we had together. And I'm just curious from your point of view. So here I'm calling you, it's COVID. We're this little small organization, not a lot of money, probably barely enough money to even pay your first year's salary. You really had to believe that we were going to exist because we probably didn't look very good from a job security standpoint. You knew we were a startup. So when you got the call from us, what was it about you, your background, or your call to say yes to this? What was it in you?
Well, I think that it was just, the universe brought us together at the exact moment. Right at that time that you had your card table and you were thinking about telemedicine, I had written a white paper on telemedicine and had been serving in the healthcare industry. And I knew we were doing great things, but I had started doing some community meetings at local apartments because I said, we're not getting these people here. They're not coming to our building. Our building's open from 8 to 5. And they don't think that they qualify and don't want to put up with our long application. And so I said, we're just not serving that working family. And that's what gets me going, is that working family. So it was two things. It was one, I knew that there needed to be different kinds of impact, and telemedicine was one of those ways. I'm tired of buildings open 8 to 5 and long lines and qualifications that are supposed to be serving working families, and they're not. And the second thing is I am a working family, and I deeply believe in using my voice to share the perspective. I'm a single mom, and when my son was born, life was hard. He was premature, had a lot of health issues, and I remember I was 5 days away from payday with a bank account that was overdrawn. And my son is toddling around, wheezing as I'm sitting in the sink trying to put on my mascara, and I just had to stop myself and say, Jennifer, what are you doing? You got to take your kid to the doctor today. You can't ignore it anymore. And so I packed him up and I went down to the bank, walked in and I placed him on that metal ledge and I begged. I quietly begged to tell her to cash my check instead of depositing it to overdraft fees so I could take my son to the doctor. And it was $85. That was my tipping point. At that hour on that day, I just needed $85. And I think my story just really echoes the working families. There's a silent suffering that's happening inside apartments all over this country from working families who are living paycheck to paycheck. And when one thing gets out of balance, it's not about if, it's when and how long do you stay fallen. And it's these access points that can make the difference, the financial tipping points that can eradicate that and help working families keep going forward and create better sustainability. And so for me, I came to Veritas because I knew this was the chance. No boundaries, no holds barred, as they say, the kind of the Texas cowboy way, that we were going to go after it and we were going to run into the living room instead of running into building a building that needed lights and qualifications. Instead, I ran to the living room of an apartment resident.
Yeah, Jennifer, you created the our tagline, which is your living room is our office.
Yeah.
And actually, if people ask us what's been the success, I want you to talk a little more about what we've created in how many years together? How many years have we been together?
You know what, JP? It's going to be 3 years in August 1st. Just
Woo-hoo!
3 years.
Oh my God, we need to celebrate this. But so in under 3 years, obviously, I want to talk about that. But so I mean, that's incredible. That is a big difference, I think. And if people ask you, I know what's been our secret to success is the fact that we're not in some corporate tower trying to do good things from a corporate tower and guess what people need. We're knocking on doors, literally knocking door to door, asking people what they, gaining their trust, building a relationship, and then from there we can actually do what they need as opposed to what we think people need, which is maybe a mistake that happens sometimes with nonprofits. Tell us a little more, like, where have you taken this thing in 2.5 years? Like, where were we and where are we now? And tell us, like, how you're carving this and how you're thinking about this.
So we started with just serving just 400 units,
Yeah.
just 400 apartment units. And it was the middle of a pandemic. And so it was just coming out of some lockdowns and people were still afraid. And we knew we had this gift of telemedicine for people. We knew people were suffering. And so I got in my car and I drove down to Houston, Texas. And it was one of Tom Bacon's properties. He's like, come on, try it here. And we started on a Saturday morning just knocking on doors. And I just said, hi, I'm Jennifer. I'm here to talk to you about your free doctor visits. And people would start saying, yeah, I saw that email. What's the catch?
What's the catch? People are always suspicious because most people are hustling people.
Right, exactly. What's the scam? And I said, I know it sounds too good to be true, but it really is. And then the next question that came out was, why are you doing this? Who's doing this? Why are you doing this? And I got to say the best line ever. This is a gift from your owner. And it physically transformed people standing in a living room to know that they didn't have to justify, prove themselves, explain themselves, that someone was here to say, I believe in who you are and where you live matters to me. And here is your free doctor visit. And that started a revolution. And so now fast forward to 3 years.
Can I say one thing about that, Jennifer? Like as you say that, I've been on this journey. In fact, yesterday I recorded with Ryan Moran. It was a thing about why and happiness. But the whole thing I mentioned is that Ryan asked me a quick question. He said, when do you have the luxury to think about your why versus just surviving? And I said, it just depends how quickly you want personal happiness. If you want joy, so if you're not in your why, I don't care how rich you get, you're never going to find your happiness. And so when you're talking about that, this has been my journey, and it's so aligned with what you're saying, because for me, my dream for Veritas that I was yearning for as a for-profit entrepreneur is one day having some relationship with a resident where I could basically, the first word I used was decency. Like, let's be more decent. I don't think we're being that decent to these people. I think we're being extractive. Then it came, I have this word, it's actually on neon lights in my office. Let's have respect for these residents. And that kind of journeyed to respect. But ultimately, when you really think about it, what is it really? It's really love. And you know that. So when you're telling your story, your energy is my energy at this point. But it's taken me a long time to get there. And to be honest, Veritas for me is still a work in progress of how far I can love a stranger. It's actually for me, it's an exercise in my own spiritual growth. What does it mean to truly love a stranger that I have very little in common with? We're living different lifestyles, different ways, probably don't have a ton in common as far as like what we're doing. And yet, can you show that much compassion and love for a fellow human? So you have no idea how much it means to me. But I also, even 2 years ago, I wouldn't have described it the way I'm describing it today. So your journey of what you're creating is infectiously changing how I'm acting as a businessman, and my level of joy and satisfaction and dreams is opening, and I can't close it. I said to Ryan, the problem is once you know your why and your purpose, you can't go back. It's like once you fall in love, you can't unlove it. You can't unsee it. So as you're describing, it's not just the impact on the residents, you're having an impact on owners, is what I'm telling you, that are open to a spiritual journey of more fulfillment and satisfaction.
And owners are having an impact on me.
Right?
So it's this
like
ecosystem.
It's this crazy
I will
ecosystem.
never be able to be the same again. I will never meet with someone in any office after sitting in their living room. Our staff members are invited to be people's godparents. We sit at the table for birthday parties. And this idea of relationship, because that's what our secret sauce is. We call ourselves the radicals, right? Yeah. Radical resident engagement. And this idea to be able to sit with someone and share intimately their life, not because they have to or are mandated to tell me who they are, but because they want to. Yeah. And because I am delivering with them in this mutual respect for just being human beings.
And trust and like everyone's hustling everyone. So actually, once you get past your point every time, what's the hustle? And they realize you're just here to serve. Then you get you get to go to a whole other level where people are like, oh my God, there's some really good people who actually just care. And I know it's out there, but I feel like that's a lot of your secret, the secret sauce of Veritas.
When you speak like and you look like the people you serve, and you knock on a door, not because you want something back, but because you simply want them to know I'm your neighbor It changes the dynamic. What we've done is we've created a model in Veritas that is not transactional, but is completely relational based. Transaction is you put out your table and you say, you got free backpacks, or, hey, come to the clubhouse and get a free Chick-fil-A sandwich. Nobody needs that anymore. That's not what working families want. That's not what people living paycheck to paycheck need. What they want is to be able to not have to press one and wait 25 minutes for some AI robot to come on and tell them how to make the schedule for their pediatric appointment. What they want is for somebody to not make them feel bad because, hey, they need a doctor's appointment or they need tutoring resources and can't afford it. What they want is a relationship. It's the same that we all want. Owners want a relationship with their residents. Why are they always moving out? Why is it always so hard? And so what we do is when we focus on the relationship, we take all the tension off that property. Property managers are less tense. Owners are less tense. Residents are less tense.
Well, and I imagine residents get to know each other. They actually start to form some of their own communities. I know you do leadership councils.
That's right.
Things like that,
That's
too.
right. They come out, we are running summer pool programs and we don't have to ask anybody. Lydia just makes her own platter of bologna sandwiches and brings it because she wants to share with her neighbors. I remember the first resident council meeting I ever did. I was all excited. I had my list. We were going to talk about trash and cleanup and all these kind of things. And this gentleman stood up and he said, "Excuse me, ma'am. I understand you may have something important to talk about, but I don't know what is more important than knowing my neighbor right now. You just shut it down." He's like, I don't need you to tell me what you're selling me. All I need is for you to create the opportunity that I can start a relationship.
I'm sure you've heard this. There's such a crisis of loneliness in this country, especially after the pandemic, and people feeling technology is isolating us. The pandemic isolated us. And so as human beings, feeling connected to a community, whether it's your church, your synagogue, in this case, gosh, you're in a community you're living with 200 other souls or 250 other souls, actually about 700 souls, 200 units of families, maybe 500-600 souls all living under the same roof. And for a lot of people, if you don't get that chance to connect, you literally are just in and out, working, coming home, and there's no life there. So this idea of community as a pathway to joy, as a pathway to feeling you're part of something, where you feel cared for by the owners, cared for by your neighbors. You think about how boring. When I got into apartments, I thought, oh my God, going from Sony Pictures where I produced animation for kids, I thought, gosh, I'm going to do apartments. Gosh, this is going to be so boring and so like financing. And then you realize, oh my gosh, I've got this product. It's not boring at all. I have a captive audience. I'm not selling a clip and trying to get someone's, 20-second attention. We have a community here of souls that spend hours together and they can either speak to each other or not. And how can we effectuate that? So what you're saying, Jennifer, is so important for so many reasons. I actually would argue that in these challenging times of being pulled away in stress, to create a community, I could argue spiritually, it's just like the right thing. Why wouldn't you want to have happy clients? Because these renters are our clients. And I can tell you from the business side, I've already proven the case that resident retention, happy people who are feeling connected tell their friends and family, and will bring referrals to you so your buildings stay occupied fuller, longer with the same people. So there's a strong business case for resident retention. So isn't that the double bottom line that we're always talking about?
It is. It's better retention, higher leasing renewals, better cash payments, all of those things. I would also argue this point, that if you're interested in equity and if you're interested in celebrating the diversities in our communities, there's nowhere it's seen more fervently than on our apartment communities. More than 50% of renters in the United States come from a diverse background. The average Veritas resident is 33, employed full-time, and 45% speak a language other than English. And so celebrating the diversity and the rich legacy and cultural history and just the enumerated talents of our residents, when we create community, I've met seamstresses and and bakers, and just I've met nail techs and so many exciting residents, and they all come, again, that idea of trust. Our diverse communities don't have a lot of trust, and so it even becomes more powerful that they're in this community where they can build trust, and that creates loyalty, which comes back to that intangible ROI. So Veritas brings ROI for the living room by bringing dollars impact back to families through our health, education, and economic advancement programs. That then in turn brings equity and dollars back for the owner, because that resident feels included in a community.
It makes, I mean, think about how basic this is. And yet, as you say it, I can tell you most businesses don't think that way. And I would really encourage you, if you locked into this podcast and you're listening to it, it's because there's something in you that says, I can, not only am I a great entrepreneur, but I know I can do it at a different angle. This is the secret sauce, guys, that I would tell you. And, I think more and more younger entrepreneurs are starting to get it. It's that is so powerful, and quite frankly, I think it's a strategic competitive advantage. I can tell you, I think I'm going to just the people, and I think you're seeing the same thing, that don't come on board will lose to this anyways, because I think society has changed. I think the pandemic, I just think in general, with everything out there, people are expecting, consumers want products or services where they feel like they're voting with their checkbook, they're voting their dollars to something good, not something evil, not something too corporate. And so I would argue that it's no longer a luxury, that's imperative.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
I try not to even use the word social impact anymore.
Yeah. Conscious capitalism is a real thing. Yeah. It's a real thing. And the current economy and the people driving that economy care about who's behind, what they're supporting. Every business will have to be held to account about what their core values are. Yeah. And this is here now, and it's only going to continue to grow. And one of the things that I love about Veritas, like you said, getting back to, we operate like a business. We are prepared to offer a transformative solution across the country to workforce house owners. We're not looking at being a charity that's asking for a donation. We've created a value proposition. You've helped us have that dream, and Antonio, about where we have an ecosystem where it is an investment, and every stakeholder is called to be a part of this, from the owner to the broker to the title firm to the foundation who's going to help us launch the next innovative program. So it is a total community effort in creating this solution.
I think this is important. I think a lot of, and I love this, and I probably drive you crazy sometimes, because the entrepreneur in me is like, this needs to get really big, really fast. Money should be flowing into us. This shouldn't be like us handing out a can and ringing the thing for $25 or even $2,500 at a time. Let's get big checks. We're in an industry that's thriving, and we're actually doing people a favor. That's not even an ask. It's actually a favor of connecting them. And then, so I love this model right now. Currently about 40% of our income comes in where we ask, this isn't a free service. We're a nonprofit, but the owners do pay for these services that we provide. And I argue more and more what's happening is with these social impact funds, ESG, they actually need us. You have all these big investment funds on Wall Street that have all these environmental and social consciousness, and it's great they can raise money that way. You're always in the face of the brochure these days, in the middle of these glossy brochures.
We are the S in their ESG plan, 100%.
You are. And so it's interesting, Jennifer, and this kind of brings up my next question. So here we are from 400 units 3 years ago. In the last year, we are now at 7,000 or 8,000 units right now?
8,500, and we'll close the year close to 15,000 units.
And check this out. You've brought in 3 large institutional partners. So here we go. How many 3-year-old companies could get a Goldman Sachs, a Nuveen, and Kane Anderson? So we now have 3 large institutions, behemoth institutions, that have hired us, which is very rare for a 3-year-old company to go that far. And basically it's ours to prove. I mean, I know in our success, this just like, it's incredible. Can you talk a little about that journey of going from 400 to 8,800 and what it took to bring on, going from, a small company to big institutions, how that's the journey and how it's kind of affecting you now. How do you have to be different? And then what does this mean to you going forward?
Yeah. I think what the way that we got there was, our intention again has always been to lead with smart, innovative strategy. And we got there by proving ourselves. We are the perfect mix of what you would think touchy-feely nonprofits who care exactly about those people, but every one of our numbers, every one of our measurements, we are high energy and high achieving, is a family and a life changed. And so our first thing we set out to do was create success through impact, to say we're not going to celebrate pizza parties and bingo nights. We're going to celebrate how many people have telehealth. And to date, we have 5,400 residents using telehealth in less than 3 years, starting
incredible.
from 100 at the end of year 1 to in the middle of year 3, 5,400.
What's our outreach as far as people who call by text or by, I know concierge services, how many residents have reached out to us for something?
Yeah, 89% of our families digitally connect with us. And the number one way is text message. One of our resident coordinators can send up upwards of 792 texts a month, because this is how working families get things done. And it's not a lot.
Well, I love that you know that number right off the top of your head. That tells me you're a businesswoman. A lot of nonprofits, when they try to hit me for money, I'm like, I ask some basic questions a lot of times when people are asking me, and they don't know like their basic business. And I just love the fact that when you present to the board, you are full of numbers. You are so data driven to prove that what we're doing is not fluffy, but it's data driven with results. And I love that about that. You really are so accountable to the bottom line and treating this like a business with achievable results, KPIs. It really is.
And
it's
that's
incredible.
that's why the big companies are attracted to us, because that's the missing thing in the market, right? There may be others who are doing great work, but unless you can articulate what is your impact and how does your impact bring a return on investment and create a sustainable solution, then you're unable to work with people like Kane Anderson and Goldman Sachs and Nuveen's, because as you well know, your investors hold you accountable to the data and the numbers. And so if we intend to partner with this industry, then we need to continue to lead the way. And so I'm really excited about that. And so being able to grow that, and then we're just looking to scale as fast as we can.
Have you had to change that, having now institutional partners that we have a lot to prove to? Has it changed the way you're operating the company or thinking about the nonprofit company? Is it changing the culture, the character of like knowing, or is it like, how is it for you going from 400 to this as far as running the company?
I think it's made me much more of a data nerd, because the imperative to tell our resident stories through data. Like you started this conversation, JP, you said part of the intention in the evolution is how do you express love to your residents, and how do you know that that is happening?
Right.
And it can't just be me telling the story of meeting Myra on the corner. And so the way that we know that's happening is through our industry level KPI reporting. This is the story of love. The story of love is to know that 16% of the children throughout your portfolio are receiving after school tutoring. This is
Through us.
And so for me, that's been the biggest change, is how do we do what we know is best? Take these stories of sitting on living room couches, this relationship, but then marry that in a very strategic, impactful, data-driven way to results.
Yeah, and I know on that, because my next question, you're gonna love the next question, but and on that, as we're really forming this, where there's so many conversations we're having of how do you take this income to make sure, now we're talking after 3 years already, we've had some success, just like a startup business. How do we make this build to last so that it will last for 25, 30 years? How do we take this initial success and make sure we take it and grow it, and like take this gift that we've been given and make sure we don't blow it, but actually take it the other way and go up? And part of that, we're talking a lot about the budgets, about, again, how do we ownership, all these different ways that we can create endowments and things where the money is just almost like We talk a lot on the show about passive cash flow through real estate. I think I've taken that mentality when I talk to you about how do we create reoccurring income so that I know that this will be built to last for a long time. And then again, the more money, and I think this is where people get it wrong with money in general. Some people get really shy. Oh, I don't know. Can we charge that much? Oh, it's a nonprofit. And I'm like just the opposite. I'm like the screaming capitalist saying, remember, the more successful we are with a financial model, the more we can help. We can do endowments. I know you have a dream and a passion of doing an endowment. We can match and help people not only save money and teach them how to save money through financial literacy, but potentially match them for their first payment towards a down payment or help incentivize them to learn to save. Well, guess what? That takes money. And I love figuring out money for good, right? So like for me, it's like, it's really, you hear me in these board meetings, just, I'm going to be the one who's going to be the screaming capitalist to say more money, figure out how we can bring in more money because I know how much good we can do.
And I think
with
that the more money starts with a demand of our value point. And that's the point, that we're in partnership with an industry. You have launched a legacy for an industry, and ESG is everywhere. And it is a requirement, and people are raising billions of dollars through funds. I am the action point in your fund. And so guess what? Also, I'm a nonprofit, so you get a nice little perk when you give to me. But the point is true, exactly what you're saying. We are all in this together. You can't do your property without a property management team, a broker, a construction guy, all these things. Well, guess what? Now you can't do it without a social impact provider.
Love it.
And Veritas is the replicable, scalable solution.
Yes.
And we deserve to have the financial empowered freedom to figure out bigger and bigger impact for the residents who live at that community.
So I want to ask you your vivid vision. We talked about visions. So 3 years goes by, Jennifer. I'm going to have you on the show in 3 years from now again. Tell me what Veritas feels like in 3 years from now. Give me from numbers, feelings, anything you want to, anything that just feels like that would really excite you if we get there. Your audacious goal for the organization.
It gets me a little emotional because I have some real specifics, JP. I think you're going to love it.
Lay it on.
So 3 years from now, we're going to have 50,000 plus units serving in the United States of America. 3 years from now, we will have a staff of probably between 72 and 100 that are producing the new industry standard for social impact measurements and reporting. 3 years from now, our team, our board, will be on the cover of Forbes magazine as the fastest growing, innovative new nonprofit in the nation. And we will be giving TED Talks together to help people understand how you marry innovative business strategy with real impact. No longer will people be able to accept Chick-fil-A sandwiches, pizza parties, and bingo nights. Instead, the new standard, the new amenity will be the requirement for health, education, and economic advancement opportunities. 3 years from now, there will be gold seals at the entrance to every single Veritas apartment community because every resident will know, can't live there. I don't see that gold seal. I got to go over here to the Veritas community.
Woo. I'm going to do a mic drop. Ready? Well, you have no idea how much that resonates with me and my own vivid vision. And we actually never talked about it this way. So I'm all on board. So just as we wind down here, is there any other thoughts or anything you want to share or questions that you have or things you want to bring up?
I think for me, the journey has been incredible. Every time I drive here to Austin, I remember that day so clearly as I come up on that 3 year, and it was pouring rain from Dallas to Austin. And I'd actually never even driven to Austin. I'm this Virginia girl stuck in Texas, and I got in my car and I met with you on a rooftop. And I've never been surrounded by such clarity of purpose. And that is what resonates with me. And that's what resonates with our residents. That is what Veritas is. It is the extension of your clarity of purpose. And so I just want to say thank you, JP.
It means so much to me. It really
Yeah.
does. And boy, we're having fun together on this journey. And, one
Yeah.
of the things which I didn't expect, obviously this friendship and this shared spirit, but it's been interesting because I know, if I can talk a little bit, I'll end on this. When we met during the interview, one of the things was you were number 2 at nonprofits for a long time, but whether it was like you didn't get the chance to prove yourself as number 1 as a CEO. And I know we talked a lot about it before we even hired you. And you said to me, if somebody would just get out of my way, certain sexes and certain people would just get out of my way and let me be me, I know what I've got in me. And at the time, it seemed like a little bit of a risk. Like it was an intuitive thing, but
It was a big risk, JP.
right? You were risking you're going to even get a salary next month, and I was risking like, okay, she's never done this before. And yet look at, like, if you look at the evolution in this relationship of how you've risen just by after 20 years of somebody actually letting you do what you do. And again, I think sometimes it can be back to, whether it's race, sex, or whatever. I don't know what the exact story was, but just somebody actually giving someone a chance to do what they're great at. I just can't tell you how much I'm enjoying watching you. You're an amazing leader, but just watching just like the continuation of your like leadership, and you will be the one leading this organization to 50,000 people. And when you say it, I know it to be true. So stay tuned. You've now held us accountable. Alex, you've heard this. We made some pretty big statements here today, and we will check back in maybe sooner than 3 years. We'll see how we're doing on the metrics that we just told a lot of people out there. Thank you so much, Jennifer. So appreciate. I'm so grateful for everything that you're doing.
Yeah. Thank you, JP. Really.
Hi, this is JP. I hope you enjoyed the episode with Jennifer. It really blows me away that in 36 months, a kernel of an idea has gone this big so fast. And of course, having a great leader like Jennifer who's passionate for the mission is a game changer. Thanks so much for listening. And remember, if you like the episode, you can like and subscribe. We are at Investing on Purpose on Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube. Thank you.